In this video, you will learn the parts necessary to operate your Shopsmith table saw and how to do a basic crosscut and rip cut. One of the basic cuts that we make is a crosscut, which simply means cutting across the grain, or you can think of it as making your board shorter. I have my saw guard in place. I'm using my safety miter gauge with a gripping handle on it. I'll turn the machine on at the proper speed and make the cut. The other basic cut that we'll make is a rip cut, where we're cutting with the grain, or you can think of this as making your board narrower. Again, I have my upper saw guard in place, I have my push stick, and my feather board. All safety devices to make this a safer and more comfortable operation. There are parts you'll need for almost any operation when you're using your Shopsmith table saw. Let's start off with the tables themselves. On the left you see the large table, that's on the later models. On the right you see the Model 500 table. You will need a saw blade mounted on the Shopsmith arbor. The arbor on the left is the old 500 arbor. The arbor on the right, the larger one, is for all machines since then. That would include the Model 510, the Model 520, and the Mark 7. You will need the miter gauge for doing cross cuts. And you will need a rip fence for ripping. Here you see three different versions of the rip fence. From top to bottom, the Model 500, the Model 510, and the 520 and Mark 7 fence. And you will need to have the lower guard and the upper guard. Now let's see how it all fits together. The first thing you want to be sure is that you have a Shopsmith saw blade mounted on a Shopsmith arbor. It's important to note that the nut on the arbor is a left-handed thread, which means you turn clockwise to loosen it. To finish tightening the nut on the arbor, I'm going to mount the blade and the arbor onto the Mark V, but please be sure you're unplugged. This would be very dangerous to do if the machine were plugged in. Taking the saw blade, I'll just slide it into place, and I want to make sure I take note of where my set screw is. That goes onto the tapered flat onto the spindle. I use my 5/32 Allen wrench to tighten that up, and then I'll use a couple of standard Shopsmith arbor wrenches to tighten the nut onto the arbor. If you don't have those wrenches, you could use combination wrenches, or you could use open-end wrenches. My preference is to clamp the blade into my vise that has wooden jaws on it, and then it seems to be more secure for me when I'm tightening the arbor nut onto the arbor. But if you don't have a wooden jawed vise, you can do it the way I just showed you. Once the arbor nut is tight, I will put the saw blade and arbor inside the lower guard and slip that assembly onto the shaft and the quill. If you have trouble getting that on, a little paste wax will do a world of good. Next, I will tighten the set screw onto the tapered flat on the spindle and tighten the lower saw guard onto the quill. Now I set the table onto the carriage, snug it up, slide it over, and drop it back down. It's just that easy. Next, you'll slip your upper guard into place, make sure it's seated all the way down. Then, depending upon the cut you're making, bring up the miter gauge or the rip fence, and you are ready to start making projects. Congratulations and welcome to the Shopsmith family.